time, no doubt. So this week I had this idea, and I bounced it off him, and he said he thought it would be a pretty good idea. 35 years of being a church, 37 years since we started. So we thought, try to give a little bit of history this morning, and show you where we've come from and how we got where we are. It's good to know, I think it's good as long as we can to know those things and to pass them on, because it gives us an idea that, who's really in charge, and that's the Lord. And so I put this together. I told him about 20 years ago, I was pretty good at doing these PowerPoint presentations, but I haven't done one in 20 years. And so I don't know how this is going to work out, but we're going to see. So started off in 1984, and I don't know if this is reasonable, but for the broadcast, you could just take me out of it and just broadcast the slides. So the people at home will actually be seeing probably better than y'all will here. In 1984, there was a man named Joe Watson, and his wife's name was Willie Joe Watson, who came to Kingfisher to start a church. We had known the Watsons for a while before then. We'd been members of the same church at Hudson Avenue. He had started a church in Orange, Texas. I'd gone down there and preached for him for a week. Actually, he didn't take me down there to preach for him for a week. He took me down there to work on his trailer. And I was in my 30s at the time, and he was about 65, and he almost killed me that week that we were down there. But we had services every night. He started churches. He started in the 50s. He went to Cortez, Colorado. His wife was not healthy at all at any time during her life. She had some kind of San Joaquin fever or something when she was a teenager, and she could be walking along and just collapse. And so he had that. He had two small children. They left Wichita Falls with a car, pulling a little trailer with everything they owned and $36 in his pocket. Went to Cortez, Colorado, and started a church. I believe that church is still there. He started a church in Orange, Texas that's still there. He started a church in Altus, Oklahoma that's still there. He started, and Scott Willingham is the pastor of that church in Altus right now. And so he started several churches around, and he came here in 1984 to Kingfisher. There were other works that had been started up in this area. When we came to Kingfisher, there was a work going on in Hennessy that a man named Kent Fitzsimmons had started. There was a work in Watauga that some GARB folks, a nice family, visited us a few times after they shut their work down. And there have been several other works get started around that same time. None of them are still here. But there have been some good people involved along the way. These folks, I don't have a picture of them that I took because they left before we actually organized. But Brother Malone was a builder, and he came up here to help with the building. And so we'll show you in a little bit. We bought a little building. We added on to the building. After he left here, he helped Vandeman Avenue put an auditorium on their church. He helped Edmond Road with some of their building up there. And he just kind of traveled around and did that. And so at the time, he had a daughter that was living in Kingfisher. And so he came up to be with Brother Watson, and they kind of got this thing going. They came up about June of 1984. This is Brother and Mrs. Bryant. He was the pastor of the Victory Baptist Church in Wichita Falls at the time. And the Wichita Falls was the sending church for the Watsons and for us as we came up to do that. We'd been members of Hudson Avenue, but when the work started, our pastor, Brother Moody, who by the way passed away about 2 weeks ago, said that he wanted us to join there and come up here, and so we did that. We joined Victory Baptist in Wichita Falls and came up here with Brother Watson, who was also a member of Victory Baptist at Wichita Falls. So this was our pastor, Brother Brian, and he came here and preached Anniversary Sunday for us just about every year until about the 30th. And he and his wife I believe it's day to day, but they're still alive and living by themselves, and they've been married for 70 years. You'll see a picture in a little bit. So we came up and looked around. Brother Watson came up and looked around for a place to build. At the time, if you know anything about Kingfisher, the building that was just south of where the Catholic Church is now, and there on the street where their auditorium, their fellowship hall type place is now, there was a building right to the east of that, which was a church building. It used to be a church building. And he had tried to get that building. It was a pretty nice building, brick building. But he couldn't work that out, and the Catholic Church ended up buying that building. And so he didn't get that building. But this is the building that we got. So this was 1984. If you go to Roberts, which is the northernmost stoplight in town, you take a left and go west to 11th Street, you can see the lot where the church was. I think there's still a set of steps there that we used for the church we couldn't take with us. And so this was our beginning. Those two little guys on the front porch there, one of those is your pastor, and Joshua is the other one. So we came up about September of 1984. We came up to visit one weekend because we had known the Watsons. We knew they were in Kingfisher. We thought we'd get away for a weekend and come up and visit. So we came up on a Sunday and spent the day with them. And by the end of the day, he had already asked me if I would come up and help. So Brother Watson was not one to beat around the bush with anything. He was going to take whatever he could get, and I was all he could get. So he asked us to do that. We went back to our church, talked it over with our pastor. We had at one time taken a couple of courses in Spanish conversation. We had thought we might be able to go to work with Brother Dennis in Central America, but all of that didn't work out. And if it had, Brother Dennis would have worked me to death anyway. So we came up here and got our pastor's blessing, and the church did a little send-off party, and so we came up to start the work. September of 1984. That was a cold winter. The building looked just like that, and every one of those great big windows had air blew right through it. And so there was, I think Isaac has mentioned this before, there was a little heater in the front of the auditorium, and there was a little heater in the back of the auditorium, and that's where everybody was in the winter. So we got through that winter and then began the building process. This is what the front of the building looked like. Could use a little paint. But we put up a little sign. The sign on the building says Victory Baptist Mission, and then we spent $6 and built that other sign. Said Victory Baptist Church. I would like to say that we're pretty fortunate to have the resources we have right now, because it wasn't always that way. When we changed out when we put the back building on and we changed out the heat and air unit, we bought a used furnace to put in the back, and we had to replace the gas line was bad that came from the meter to the church. The gas line was bad, and I think it was going to cost us like $360 to fix the gas line. We had to have a special church meeting to try to raise that so that we could replace the gas line and get the church going. So we did that. That was our beginning place. The Watsons lived in that trailer right on the property, and so there was no excuse as far as Brother Watson was concerned of not getting to church. And so when it was icy and snowy, I would call and say, I don't know, it's pretty icy down here. And we drove 35 miles to get here every day. And I'd say, I don't know, it's pretty icy this morning. We're slipping all over the place. And he said, really? He said, I didn't have no trouble. So there wasn't much time for excuses. So we made most of the trips, ice or not. So we just, got things going. We changed we put in smaller windows so the air wouldn't blow through quite as much. We got the added the addition onto the back. That may start looking familiar because it's what's right over here right now. So we got things going, and while the auditorium, in the other picture, the auditorium was on the east side, and we were going to switch it all around, redo the auditorium, put the pulpit on the west side. So we finished the back building first, and this was a double room. We've since put a partition in, so it's single rooms, but there's a double room back there. And we used that to meet in when we started after we got the auditorium apart. So you'll see my wife up there in the front. That's Melissa, our daughter. That's Patty Jack. Mrs. Watson is sitting there in the blonde curly hair, and I believe that's Elma Malone in the dark hair. That room would seat about 20 people with our fancy theater seats there, and we didn't have to worry about filling it at that particular time. So eventually, we got the church looking half decent, painted it up, had smaller windows on it, and started having church there. So that was, we stayed there until 1997, and this was the congregation in about the summer of '85, probably. After we had the building on, had it painted. The guys are hiding in the back there in the shadows, but you can see that's what the congregation looked like at the particular time. We have one more picture of the front side of those ladies. So in about October of 1985, Brother Watson sat me down and said that his time there was about winding up. He had come up in '84. He stayed 2 years everywhere he went, and whether he got something going or not, he left. He figured 2 years, if nothing happened, he shook the dust off his feet and went somewhere else. And this was going to, he thought this work had a chance to go. He was already preparing to leave by spring of '86. He'd come up in '84. Excuse me. So he sat me down and said, I'm going to be leaving spring. And I said, well, okay. I don't know what's going to happen then. So he said, well, I'm going to recommend to the church that they ask you to be the pastor. And that was news to me. So I went home and told my wife, and we both got scared. And that's how that all started. So by November of 1985, Brother Watson, Hudson Avenue had blown up at the time, and Brother Watson was down there trying to help them get their feet back on the ground. And so from about November of '85, we were kind of on our own up here. And that's kind of how that worked out. So from that time forward, we had up here. So they managed to choose some weird-looking guy. Looks kind of Amish, doesn't he? Yeah. So unfortunately, that was what they ended up with as a pastor. So we organized March 21st, 1986. We organized the church, and on March 28th, 1986, I was ordained. Some of these people in the front row, that's Clyde Womack, sitting right down here. He passed away a couple of years ago. Tim Finnegan, who was a deacon, Brother Womack's deacon at Highland. That's Brother Bryant, sitting there in the blue suit. That's me in the middle, you may recognize. That's Brother Ben Shipley, who was the pastor at Edmond Road Baptist Church at the time. He has since passed away. That's one of his deacons who was also a deacon at Hudson Avenue, and I never remember his name. That's Henry Kralik. Next to him, he was a deacon at Hudson Avenue. And Brother Louis Turk on the end, who was a missionary to Indonesia. Brother Malone is sitting right in the next pew, kind of right over from me. Brother Jack DeLay. I think that's Kenny Jack right behind Brother Bryant. So that's what the ordination service looked like. The place was pretty packed out for the ordination service. That was the last time it was packed out for a while. After that, and so that's Brother Bryant praying with me. for which I was very grateful. I could use all the prayers I could get. I'd like to introduce you to a few of the folks that, had it not been for them, we would not be here. So I may not get through this without a tear, but there's a lot of history here. This is Jack and Jonah DeLay, and if you were going to look for a couple that you wanted to start with, you wouldn't find a better one. Brother Jack was probably the most humble, down-to-earth, godly example of a man that you would ever find in your life. And he was a great help to me. I was a kid, and he'd been around a long time. He'd been a part of the work that they had started in Hennessy, and it had folded, and they were gracious enough to come and join our church. Brother Jack sought no recognition whatsoever. But he would teach Sunday school, he would preach when I was gone, he would do whatever was necessary to be done, and was there until after we built this building. And he was energetic. He had a bad heart for about the last 15 years of his life, but he walked about 6 miles a day trying to keep himself in shape, and did everything it needed to do. Miss Jonna, one thing about Miss Jonna, you always knew exactly where you stood with Miss Jonna. Miss Jonna didn't have any problem about telling you what was wrong with everything. And so it worked out really well. She was an organizer. She would be the first one here for the fellowships, the last one to leave. Helped everybody clean up, wanted to make sure everything was just right. And he was kind of my rock. Came up here. This is the Barnes family, Bill and Ruby. Brother Barnes wanted to be a doctor, and he would have been a good doctor. But they grew up during the Depression, and they didn't have 2 cents to rub together. That's where the term dirt farmers come from. They had a farm east of Hennessy. Her family owned a farm, and his family owned a farm, and they didn't have anything. And they lived like that for the rest of their lives. But that's not the end of the story, because in around the 50s and 60s, they found oil up there, as Chris can probably tell you. Now, Brother Jack was an oil field superintendent, production superintendent. And they found oil on both family properties that they had owned. And so Mrs. Barnes actually had the best land. And according to Brother Jack, the well that was one of the wells that was on Mrs. Barnes' property was the most productive well that ever came in that area up there. So they went from having nothing. He kept them alive during the Depression by trapping. And they went from that to, let's just say, being okay financially. But they never got used to that. They never lived like that. They splurged and bought a pickup truck and an Airstream trailer and would go to South Texas for 6 weeks in the winter. And they did that, I think, once or twice after we came up here. They were good, sound, independent Baptists, and they had tried on several occasions to get a work going in Hennessy. Back in the 70s, Buddy Woolbright, who Brother Bryant knows, went up there to try to start a church. That didn't work out. We almost sent somebody from Hudson Avenue up there, but that didn't work out, and that one folded, and there was a couple other works since then. And so they showed up at our place on Resurrection Sunday, and I was teaching on Easter, what Easter is and is not. And by the way, Easter is not good. So they listened to that, and they came back. And they stayed. And we were so grateful for that. Brother Barnes, I think when I preached his funeral, I mentioned this because everybody in town knew it. Brother Barnes was not known for his generosity because he knew what it was like not to have any money, and he'd come through the Great Depression. And so But there was not, as far as we were concerned and helping it, there was not a more generous person. And they basically kept us alive while we were up here. After we came back from Washington, D.C., they basically did keep us alive until I got a job. This guy's name is Keith Brown. He was about 19 years old here at the time. And this church has produced a couple of preachers, and he's one. He is now the pastor at Sherwood Baptist Church in Newcastle. And he doesn't look quite like that anymore. He's bald and wears a beard to make up for it. So, but we were glad to have him at the time. He had lots of energy. He was a young person. He complained to me every week that he would never find a girl. And he found a beautiful girl, got married, had 3 kids. I was the best man at his wedding. And he's doing real well spiritually in a family. They have one daughter that's really disabled. They thought she wouldn't make it past about 12, and she's 21 and still alive. And so we're thankful for that. There's a few more. My clicker's not working. There you go. This is the Joe Kester family. Brother Joe was oil field worker and damaged his lungs in a fire. So I always had trouble breathing from the time that I knew him. And they came here, were founding members of this church. That's Miss Juanita in the front. She's presently at the Cimarron Nursing Center. Was a charter member of the church. We gave her a Bible on her 80th birthday. That's their daughter, Teresa. In the middle, she lives in Texas. And Brother Joe was a character. It's just unbelievable. Sense of humor. Just you could listen to him tell stories for hours. But he was a real supporter and never did anything the way normal people would do things. So one Sunday morning before church started, we'd gotten in, sung like the first song. Brother Joe is at the back. He comes forward before the church ever starts. He said, "If I don't do this, I'll never do this." And he had been saved while he was in the hospital a couple of years before that, and he'd never been baptized. And so that morning he came. He said, "I need to be baptized." And so we baptized him, but if baptism saves you, his left arm is not saved. One of the strongest men I ever knew, but when I baptized him, he had his hand on the side of the place of the baptismal, and I got him down except for that hand. It stayed right there. So his hand never got baptized, but the rest of him got baptized. So we're thankful for them. This is the Darrell Kester family. They were with us for about 16 years. That little guy in the front right there, if you go to the hospital over here, he's the chief medical officer for the hospital over here and runs the clinic. And so if you go over there and see him, you tell him you saw him when he was about 5 years old. That's him right there. That's his parents. They still live here. Risa still works over there at the clinic. She's a nurse with every kind of degree you can get. And so they're involved in the medical field. We're thankful for their participation. He helped us out with the original building and all of that. So we're thankful for them and for the time that they gave us to be here. This is what the pastor's family looked like in those days. Myself and my wife, who could stand and walk and sing and play the piano and all those things that a pastor's wife's supposed to do, did all of those things. She's holding Melissa. I'm holding Nathan. And he was born in 85, so that's probably about 86. That's my wife's mother that was there. She lived with us for a while, for a couple of different times. Once down on 64th Street and once after we moved out to Surrey Hills. Her husband had passed away at the age of 59. He actually passed away while they were out here. She stayed out here for a while. So that's Rachel Joshua. That's your pastor right there in front, standing up. So that was about 1986 or so. This is the Rutherford family. You may recognize the little girl standing right in the front there with the look that says, "I don't want to be here." That's Joshua's wife. He loved her since he was 10, and he finally got to marry her. That's Keith in the back. He was Ramona's son. And Miss Ramona was saved, I think, the December before we organized, and so she was a charter member of the church. And they were really faithful. We appreciated them. This is, you may recognize this young lady on the end of this picture, because she's sitting right over there. This is the Curtis Kirby family at the time. First time Brother Curtis came and visited the church, I walked up, shook his hand, introduced myself, and the first thing he said was, "I'm just visiting here." I said, "Okay, it's okay with me." So about 8 months later or so, they joined there, and we enjoyed them since then. He is in the Veterans Nursing Home in Norman as we speak. This is Bob and Wanda Russell. Unique individuals, if there ever were one. They're from Rue Bottom, Oklahoma. Anybody know where Rue Bottom, Oklahoma is? I've been there a few times. I've preached like 3 funerals there. In case you didn't know, Rue Bottom, Oklahoma is right next to Leon. So I'm sure everyone knows where Leon, Oklahoma is, which is right next to the Red River. Rue Bottom consists of a Baptist church and 2 houses, and Leon consists of 2 sheds and a motorcycle. But there's a big graveyard there in Leon where everybody gets buried from that whole area, and that's where these folks are buried. I preached a service for Miss Wanda here, and then we went down there for her burial service. They had a service down there and buried her down there. Isaac actually preached Brother Bob's funeral. I don't know where they have it. They have it in Chickasha, down there somewhere, or Cordell. They left us about the same time that Brother Jack died and the Gasaways and all that. And they went to a nursing home facility, kind of an assisted living center facility in Cordell. So we went out there and visited him a few times. Miss Wanda is probably one of the most famous people here for saying, when we were talking about somebody on the prayer list one night, Miss Wanda piped up and said, "Well, she's expired." So this was the church just before we left for Washington, D.C. I don't even consider that really leaving anymore. That was our time in the wilderness. We left. My job was transferred. I wanted to stay. I asked everybody in the church if I should stay. Nobody said yes. I took that as a hint. And we moved to, actually they didn't want to be responsible for trying to support us. And so we went to D.C. A year and a half later, in about May, they called and asked us if we would come back and said they'd keep us alive. And that's all it took. We said, okay. So we spent a year and a half in the desert. Actually, we learned a lot. It was a kind of an amazing experience. And we came back, and that's what the church looked like at the time. There's 2 families from Io in there, the Hofferts and the Kellers, were with us for about a year, a little over a year, and they really helped the church out because it gave us about 10 more people, which we needed at the time. And then they moved on. The Kellers, actually, after he retired, they went back to Iowa. They moved to Grove, Oklahoma, and had a camp on a lake out there for quite a while. This is going to take longer than I thought, but I'll try to get through this. This is Brother Dennis Thomas, who will always be my pastor. His wife, Jolene, and 3 of their kids. We support them. They're now in Costa Rica. He doesn't look quite like that anymore, but not too far removed from that. He's been here several times. Hardest worker I ever knew. This is what the church looked like in the snow. And we got some snow. We brought the red Ford van up here one day on a Saturday because we knew it was going to snow. We drove back the next afternoon with chains on the van all the way from here to Oklahoma City. This is what we looked like back in the day, myself and Patricia. Church got a break because our anniversary and her birthday are only one day apart, so they only had to buy one cake. And that made a pretty good deal. So this is what the property looked like in 1994. We had a new sign. There's a story that goes along with that sign. The guy in Altus painted one for their church. I went down there to preach a revival and saw it, and I thought, man, that's a pretty good looking sign. We should try to get us one of those. So a guy down there painted it for us. I went down there and got it and brought it back. When I put it up, I noticed that crucified was spelled with an S. C-U-R-S. I said, this is not going to work. I'm a proofreader. So I went out and got some blue paint and some white paint, tried to mix it up, make the same color, and changed it into a C. I thought I did a pretty good job. You know? And yeah, you would never know except I told you. So this is what it looked like inside. This was anniversary 1994, inside the building down in the flood zone. We got flooded out twice, and we saved up enough money out of what the flood insurance, because we had flood insurance, federal flood insurance. We saved up enough money to kind of make a down payment on some land, and so we ended up buying some land with that. This is what our family kind of looked like at the time. We did some singing. We traveled around and did some singing. Texas, Kansas. That's me in my Ken Copeland suit there, the white suit. I've still got that suit, but I haven't tried it lately. I don't know. First wedding we had was this couple right here. You may recognize him, except he had a nice head of red hair. I don't know where that went, but that disappeared. And so that's the first couple that we had as a wedding. This is the Rutherfords with Brother Harvey. We prayed for Brother Harvey for several years. And he would come every once in a while, and he ended up liking to hear us sing. So he would come on Sunday to hear us sing. And he was saved here eventually. And was a great benefit to this church. This building right here probably would not be here if it were not for Brother Harvey. So we thank for him. I don't know if they're watching today. If they are, we appreciate you, brother. They've got it set up at their house, and they have trouble getting it to work because they're kind of like us, and they don't do well with technology. So I don't know if they can watch. But we're thankful for them and for Brother Harvey and for all of his work that was put in down here. This is the church just before we left there. That was probably like the summer of 95, 96, just before we left. We bought this property from a guy named Claude Land, who used to have a house right down there, which you can kind of see in this picture. House was right down here. This was before the hospital or any of this stuff. There was nothing out here except his house. He sold us the northern half of this and gave us a right-of-way to the well. And then a few years later, he sold us the southern part. So we had the whole triangle. This is Brother Bill Barnes. Shortly before he passed away, just before he moved out of his house, this is his birthday. We went up there and had a birthday party for him. We decided that we were going to, when we bought this property, this is what we did to the old building. We moved it. And I called everybody in the world. You wouldn't be able to do this now. I called everybody in the world to see what permissions we needed to get, and everybody I talked to, state, county, city, they said, we don't care. Do whatever you want. I said, that works for me. The only people that cared were the electric company, because they had to, OG&E had to raise some lines for us to get the building through. And they were going to charge us a whole bunch of money to do that, but I happened to know somebody that worked there. So this is bringing the building to its current location, setting it up, and this is what it looked like when we got here. We had services in the trailer. For a while, this is the work crew. It's Brother Jack, Brother Harvey, and Brother Darrell, and me watching. I did that pretty well for most of the time. The Lord provided a parking lot for us. They were tearing up the shoulders of the roads out here and getting rid of the stuff, and we just managed to get some stuff. And so our parking lot's pretty solid because of all of that asphalt, that discarded asphalt and stuff that we managed to get ground up and made a parking lot out of it. This is inside the trailer where we met until the church was finished enough so we could get in it. This is the work crew that put the front end on the church, the entry on the front, which is still there. This is what the building looked like after we got it done. And it was a nice, pretty looking little building. It worked out pretty well for us. And that was probably around 2000 or so. We had a pretty good looking group. We got to where we were running about 60 in the old building, and it got pretty crowded, and so we decided we were going to have a new one. Had a couple of more weddings. We had this fine looking couple here. Got married here. Amen. God is good. Oh, gave him a nice wife. Take care of him. Rachel and Daniel got married here. That's our son-in-law and our daughter. This is what the building looked like after we started adding the addition on. We had a little fire marshal trouble, and it took us about 3 years to get that done. But the Lord used that to pay it off, because when we finished construction of that building, this is when we just got in the new building, this building right here. When we finished construction of that building, we had just about the same amount of money in the treasury as when we started, and it cost us $150,000 to put the building up. So the Lord was good to us. People would just drive up into the parking lot and write Brother Jack a check for $10,000. Say, we want to help out. Yeah, it was amazing. Just amazing. So this was our fancy sign back then. It says, that's the one we got. Victory Baptist Church. It worked. Let people know who we were. This is our daughter and Steve. They got married here in this building after we got. I don't know if Melissa will ever listen to this, but Melissa said ever since she was 5 years old, the only thing she wanted to do, get married. And so she did. We got the double wide mobile home, which most of you know about because it was sitting over here. We got that about 2007. Brought that in, put it up here, and that's what the property looked like after we got everything together. That's what the church looked like in 2008 when Brother Bryant retired. We did him up a little plaque to send down there. The F.M. Buddy Bryant, a man of vision, from the Victory Baptist Church in Oklahoma. So that's what the church looked like at the time. This is Brother Bryant and Mrs. Bryant. Married 70 years. That was about a year ago. And they're still there. They don't get around much. Brother Bryant has a tendency to run into things when he drives. So this is what the church looked like about that time. These are the longs right down here. We'll run through some of those. They were a great help. They were saved here. We had a bunch of other folks that are there. And we go. See this little girl here? Time passes. This little girl, in case you don't recognize her, is about to have a little boy. That's Gabby. So that's, been through a long time. And old people get older. Young people get older. Old people get older. This is just a picture of the church. Rachel and Daniel were still here. This was on an anniversary Sunday because Brother Bryant was here when we had that picture taken. And this, you recognize this because most of y'all are in this picture. So that's what the church looks like now. I'd like to mention a few people before we wrap up that have come and gone through the years. Brother Chad Holland was here for about 5 years. Amen. Worked at United up here, and came here, helped us out, was a treasurer just before he left. He's living in Norman now, I think, has a different job. This is John Farrar and Carolyn. They were members here for probably about 7 or 8 years. They're members in Okarche now. He helped us out. He was here for the building of this building, helped us out a lot. One thing he didn't help us out with was the brickwork around the trailer. We got the trailer, and he was very, very generous. He paid to put brick underneath the trailer. But he came by one day, and they were 2 levels too high. They put two rows too many of bricks, so he yelled and screamed at them until they took the 2 rows out, which made it more difficult to crawl underneath the trailer. But neither here nor there. Lynn and Louise Gassaway spent about 10 years with us. Fine couple. He had business around here for a long time. Her first husband had died, had drowned. They got married later in life and spent the last of their years with us. She passed away. I did her funeral, and he passed away about a week after that. That was a bad time for our church. That year, about 18 months, we lost about 8 people. And really, we've just kind of recovered from that just now. This is Brother Adam's parents. They were with us for a few years. They were saved here. He passed away a few years ago from cancer, and she's living in Oklahoma City. We see her every once in a while, and we're glad for them and for their service. These are the Longs. They spent their last years with us. They were saved here. They always said they were not church people. We're not church people. But eventually, they became church people, and we're glad for them. These are the McIlvains, kind of a sad story there. Caleb got married about 6 months later. He was killed in an automobile accident. That was the biggest crowd I think I ever preached to. The auditorium at Crescent, they had it at the big First Baptist Church auditorium there. There's probably about 600 or 700 people there. He was a football hero in Crescent, and it's just a sad situation. But they were with us for a while, and we appreciate them. And Miss Wyola knows these people. This is Randy and Catherine Johnson. They were members here for several years. They moved to Washington State to take care of his parents, and they sent us their tithes the whole time they were gone. So they still send mission money here. So we're glad for them. So I finished up pretty much in time. So we move on from here. I just thought it was reasonable because we've got a lot of new people, and so you all will know where we came from. The original humble beginnings is where we came from. And so this is your pastor's family.